Hi handy people, welcome back to my channel Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. This is going to be take two because the first one was too long. I use bed frames for just about everything. I have a cheap welder I paid 50 bucks for. If you go to Harbor Freight, you can get one for 100 bucks minus 20% if you use the coupon. Get a welder, it will make your life much better. I looked on Amazon for this and it was $120 for the cheapest one you needed. They had, and you have to have a mower with a roll cage that goes around the top just so you can bolt their stupid plate to it with 6,000 adjustments to hold a weed eater. It's ridiculous, it's expensive, and I don't have a roll cage. This is a commercial machine, that is a commercial machine, neither of which have roll cages. So maybe you want to put weed eaters on yours as well. I'm putting a weed eater on one side, I'm putting an edger on the other, and I'm building a shelf back here so I can keep extra fuel, weed eater line, small tools, things like that. And I'm completely self-contained because when I cut grass, I just drive this or I will drive that. I'm doing the same thing to that machine. I do not drive, I do not have a trailer. This is my transportation when I work all day long because I'm not taking a truck and trailer. So I want everything to be all encompassed. So I put two uprights, one on each side of this plate. I drilled the holes, put two bolts on each side with locking nuts. Don't forget the nylon lock nuts. And then I decided for my cross piece, which is not connected yet, it's just held up by clamps. I want it 9 inches out the side because I want my machine to run right down the side without being in the way of the controls. And I also want it to be lower than my control arm when it's in the down position. And you'll see how I fix that later for the front part of it. And that's what we got so far. I'm getting ready to cut my length on this side. Then I'm going to clean up all the paint here and here, and I'm going to tack those two pieces together. And I am building this so that it's completely self-contained. It can come off with 2 nuts and bolts on each side. The whole thing will come off, so nothing will be in the way of the motor. In case I ever have to work on it, take the cover off, get to anything, I can literally just unbolt this, lift it off, and it's not going to add too much weight either. So that's where we are so far. I'll bring you back in a second. Okay, now as you can see, I took the grinder and I cleaned all the paint and rust off of both sides where I'm going to be welding, as well as the back side of what I'm going to be welding to. There it is. People make the mistake of not cleaning paint and whatnot off, and then they find that their welds don't hold, and they don't exactly understand why. They get crappy welds. It's because stuff is in the way. You can't weld. Oops. You can't weld through that gunk and dirt. It's not going to work. So make sure you clean everything up. Now I'm just marking my 9 inches on one side. I've already marked, I'm coming down. I've already put my marks there. And now it's just a matter of having 6 fingers and 4 arms so that you can get the clamps back on. Now normally I use vice grips for quick clamp jobs like this, but if you watch my channel you know that I moved recently. I'm not really set up with my tools yet until I get a new shop, and honestly I just don't know where my damn vice grips are. But these big clamps were handy and they'll do just fine. Because now all I'm doing is I'm going to tack this in place, and I'm not too concerned if it's perfectly straight. Measure it up the best you can, and I'm going to grab the welder and we're just going to tack it. Now I'm literally just tacking this in place. So a couple of good tacks and we should be all right. That should do it. Turn off the welder. I will unbolt this from the frame, take it away from the motor and the fuel lines and all that stuff for when I weld it completely. But in the meantime, a couple of good tacks is all I need. And those tacks are going to hold that plenty strong. We're not making anything that's crazy important as far as straightness, as far as perfect lengths or anything like that. We're literally making a Weedeater rack and a fuel and tool rack to put on this thing. So pretty good is pretty good. And I'll weld that up off camera. You don't need to see that. Let me show you what I'm going to do next. Now I'm just going to cut my special piece. Let me show you what that is for. If we can see, now it's windy. Today's the first chilly day we had here in Florida, and it's February. And when I say chilly, I mean it's like 65 degrees or 63 degrees or something. So here's what we got going on. I cut this small piece here. Doesn't matter that it has the adjustment holes or anything in it. What it's going to do is it's going to go just like that. And the reason for that is because when I do put the Weedeater in its spot and that plate is there, it's going to cup the handle. That's what's going to happen. And I think I need to shorten it just a little bit, but it's going to cup the handle like so to hold the Weedeater. So yeah, I'm going to shorten that up a bit because I want it to fit right in this general area. Doesn't have to be very big. It just has to cup the Weedeater without hitting the trigger, because that's what's going to hold this thing in place. So I'm going to cut this down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my handy dandy marker and mark a V here, because I'm going to cut this out with the grinder so that this will sit just the way I want it to, at about that angle. So I'm going to cut that about halfway so that that will sit down in there. Then I'm going to weld that in place, and that's what's going to hold the Weedeater. It's going to cup it so it doesn't bounce around and it doesn't just sit on one end. So I'll show you that in a second. Alright, I cut my piece down. Where did I put it? There it is. I cut my piece down, and I cut that, and it may be that it's not deep enough. I want to get my angle correct, so I'm going to notch this a little bit more off camera, and I'll show you what it's like when I fit it. Okay, now you can get a little better idea what I was talking about. I notched it out so that it would go down at an angle, so that when I put the Weedeater on, it will cradle the Weedeater and stop it from going left and right, and also give a lot more on the handle to hold, except for two little spots with the weight of the Weedeater bouncing up and down on it and messing it up. So I'm going to clean that up, get the paint grinded off of that. I'm going to grind a little tiny edge just in the front to give it a better bead to weld to, and I'm going to weld that in place. Okay, now again, I'm not the best welder in the world. I can melt steel together and make it hold. This is not building a bridge. We are putting on a Weedeater rack. So my welding is just fine for that. Now if you can see, I went ahead and gouged that out. I set that down at the angle I wanted, and I welded it in place. I got to clean it up, throw some paint on it. But now, what I have is a bracket that's as wide as the entire handle. It's at the correct angle for where I want the Weedeater to be, and it still holds it very well if the Weedeater goes up and down, which it will when you see how I put the front bracket on to hold the front of the Weedeater. But it stops all the riding and the widening and the craziness. And then I'm just going to drill a hole and put a clip over the top of it to hold it down in place nice and snug for when I'm driving down the road. So it's that simple. You can see how it cradles the Weedeater at just the right angle for the way it's sitting. And then I'm just going to put my bracket down there to hold the bottom of it up. And if I have to raise and lower the deck, this will be a floating setup so the front of the Weedeater can just roam up and down when it needs to be. Now that's where I keep the deck when I'm cutting. That's the height that I cut at. So that's where I have it set for the correct angle there. And if you want to see a part 2 to this video, let me know. You'll be able to see that front bracket in place, which is basically going to be exactly the same thing I did here. I'm going to make an upright. I'm going to weld it directly to the deck straight up, and then I'm going to put an upside down V at the correct angle so that just cradles it in place. And if you want to see part 2, which would be the other side finished as well, and the box that I'm going to weld on back here, or the frame I'm going to weld so that I can put a box back here with tools and accessories, let me know in the comments. I don't want this video to be too long, but there you go. Just from what you've seen on this video, 120 bucks for the cheapest piece of crap on Amazon, and you have to have the correct machine for it. Here, a free bed frame, and you got a Weedeater rack. So let me know in the comments if you liked it. Thanks for stopping by. See you soon.